for the last substantive speech in the government team, and I invite the government.
This is the problem regarding doctors inside for today. They get tangled up in their own mechanism that they created by their own self. And I'm here, standing here as a third win as the government side, and I'll show you why you guys should give the win to this side, Mr. Speaker. Before that, Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, I'll read by the second speaker's point, whereby he tried to tell the House, by enforcing this motion, it is a form of forcing the doctor, the speaker. Like what my first speaker has actually explained, we're not forcing the doctor and saying, hey, tell the doctor, tell the policeman what is actually happening. No, we're not strangling the doctor. We're just creating a law, Mr. Speaker, saying that you have to give the information, you have to pass the information next, Mr. Speaker. You're just passing the baton so that the next person can run. What is wrong with that? Secondly, Mr. Speaker, he tried to tell the House, how is it by implementing this motion, you are sending a subconscious message to the people that the government is being cruel. Now, I don't get the point. How is it that the government is being cruel if you are preventing people from dying, Mr. Speaker? That is a point that they have to clarify. And Mr. Speaker, he also tried to tell the House in his substantial, whereby he tried to tell the House how is it that it is a burden to the doctors, Mr. Speaker. Well, obviously, Mr. Speaker, we're not going to let the doctors solve the case by themselves. That is why, through our mechanism, we are only passing the baton so that the doctors can get back to work in his clinic. That is why, Mr. Speaker, our proposal here stands. We are not going to force the doctor into solving the cases together with with the policeman. Well, what we are proposing is that we're making it a law saying that the doctors have to pass on the information to the policeman so that they can actually take the next step. What are the next steps? So that they can actually investigate whether it is true or not, whether there has been some foul play or not, Mr. Speaker, based on the evidence that is proposed by the doctors. So what is wrong with that, Mr. Speaker? Now moving on to the second speaker's point, whereby he tried to tell the House how is it that doctors aren't able to actually differentiate what is internal bleeding and what is not, Mr. Speaker. Well, I believe this is contradictory with reality. Because why? Because doctors, before they become doctor in the first place itself, they have to go after 7 years of study in Oxford, Cambridge, Ireland, India, Mr. Speaker, because we don't have IIUM, Mr. Speaker. Okay, so what happens next is that I'm sure after 7 years of study, you are clever enough to differentiate whether someone hit you on the head purposely or whether it is through domestic violence, Mr. Speaker, domestic abuse. What we're talking here is about saving lives, and that should be the real case, not hyperactive kid rolling down the floor every day, Mr. Speaker. Now, how do I know whether doctors are capable of differentiating or not? Now, here's the best part of this debate. We're talking about SBT students here, okay? Now, we're talking about fully residential students, okay? Fully residential students, generally, they like to go to the clinic. Why? Because they want to have an MC so that they can go there. Okay, I'm sorry, okay, that's different. Okay, you don't need it here. Okay, so the point here is that if the doctors can differentiate whether I'm lying or not, okay, what makes you think they can differentiate whether it is internal bleeding or not? They can differentiate whether I'm lying or not. Sometimes, even though I am a debater, I still go back to the school empty-handed, Mr. Speaker. I went there with hope, but then I came home with telling my friends, okay, I failed with my mission to go back home, Mr. Speaker. If the doctors are clever, Mr. Speaker, if the doctors can actually differentiate that, what makes you think they can actually differentiate whether it is internal bleeding or not? Please sit down, sir. Now, secondly, Mr. Speaker, they also try to attack our mechanism on how it is not feasible and how they prefer warrants instead, Mr. Speaker. Well, I believe when we are talking about warrants, you are actually supporting our point. Wait, I'll take that in a minute. Why? Because warrants are only released only when there is a formal interjection by someone professional, Mr. Speaker. Well, it's not as if the second speaker, if he comes down, if he goes to a police station and then he points out to me that, hey, I'm a rapist. And then most probably the police going to point out there and say, hey, stop being a clown even though you look like one, Mr. Speaker. So that is why, I'm sorry, just joking. But the point is that, okay, when talking about doctors, obviously the police would believe in, Mr. Speaker, only then warrants can be actually released. Because warrants are not released if there is no proper information, Mr. Speaker. Proper information is one of the prerequisites before a warrant is released, Mr. Speaker. They prefer to stick to the status quo, which is warrants. But the problem with the status quo is that warrants aren't being released. Why aren't they being released? Because there is no one to report to them. Mr. Speaker. Now, speaking of obligation, going back to the point that is laid out by my second speaker, but before that, yes.
So are you saying that it is okay to break someone's privacy?
Now, here's the best part, Mr. Speaker. Now, we're talking about privacy. Okay, we're talking about someone's right towards privacy, Mr. Speaker. Well, it is undeniable that everyone has a right towards privacy. But as actually proposed, as actually shown by the government, Mr. Speaker, emergency laws, for instance, wiretapping, Mr. Speaker, whereby we take a right for the greater benefit of the majority, Mr. Speaker. We believe in democracy, whereby it is for the greater good, for the greater number, Mr. Speaker. That is what governments are all about, greater good for the greater number. Where if a right is misused, Mr. Speaker, we take it away from that particular individual for the right of the majority itself, for the, Mr. Speaker, or for the right of a much more significant right, in this case, the right of living, Mr. Speaker. Life itself is a much more significant rather than privacy, Mr. Speaker. Which one would you prefer? Staying alive for the next 90 years, or being ashamed in front of the whole class? Obviously, you want to live, for the next 90 years. For example, Mr. Speaker, when we put someone in jail, we're taking away someone's freedom. However, Mr. Speaker, that is a necessity. That is a necessary step. Why? Because we are afraid if he goes out, if we still give him the freedom of rights, freedom of movement and everything, Mr. Speaker, we might afraid that he would use the freedom itself to harm other people. And that is why our mechanism today solves the problem. Now, the whole concept of today's debate is getting tangled up all over the place. Why? Because they have been assuming that these people, these victims, they report willingly, Mr. Speaker. Well, that's not the case, because that is not what we see in the status quo. The status quo is that somehow or other, if you go to the doctor and then you don't want to tell, you lie to the doctor, this bruise, it happened because actually I fell down the stairs, I was hyperactive yesterday, I rolled down the stairs, and then the doctors, when they examine it, Mr. Speaker, the doctors found out that you are lying, Mr. Speaker. And that is the exact concept that the government today is proposing. We're not squirreling because we know that is the issue and we are proposing a solution, Mr. Speaker. Now, they also tried to propose the House, they also tried to go against the motion because, legal confidential law that these doctors possess, Mr. Speaker. Well, that is a function of debate in the first place itself, to challenge philosophies, to challenge ideologies, Mr. Speaker. Just because it is a law, Mr. Speaker, it does not mean that it cannot be challenged, Mr. Speaker. Whereby the opposition side today, Mr. Speaker, they have failed to clash. They deny the chance to clash, Mr. Speaker. Instead, they hide behind the law, Mr. Speaker, and then they assume as if it is so invulnerable, Mr. Speaker. And what I've talked for the past 7 minutes is that I've actually crashed their whole case line down, and I backed the House to go to our case line. With that, thank you.